This may be one of our most important strategies when it comes to controlling Omicron now that we know that it's arrived in Canada.
This is CTV News Channel. Canada's Advisory Committee on Immunization is now recommending adults over the age of 50 to be offered COVID-19 boosters.
It is in the province's hands to be able to do this recovery phase, and we'll do what we can to help them out as required.
An evacuation order has been lifted for parts of BC's Sumas Prairie. Residents are returning home as the military starts to wind down its operations.
They are in our jail, all three of them, the son and both parents. They are segregated, each individually, in isolation.
And the parents of a Michigan school shooting suspect plead not guilty to involuntary manslaughter. Police say the pair were found hiding in a warehouse after an hours-long search. Good evening and welcome to CTV News Channel. Thanks for joining us. I'm Akshay Tandon. COVID-19 cases in Canada's two largest provinces continue to rise. Ontario and Quebec are seeing some of the highest daily infections in several months. It all comes as scientists urgently try to answer critical questions about the Omicron variant. There are now 18 confirmed cases of Omicron in Canada, and concerns are rising about just how quickly it's expanding its reach. CTV's Heather Butts has more.
COVID cases in Ontario are climbing. Saturday's tally hit 1,053 positive tests. In Quebec, too, another jump with more than 1,500 cases, both provinces marking the highest daily count since last spring. The vast majority are the Delta variant, but it's adding to concerns for the latest strain. Omicron has now spread to 40 countries across the globe, just 1 week after it was declared a variant of concern.
It's reasonable for Canadians to raise their guard in the face of the uncertainty.
The main reason health officials are raising the alarm: the variant has more than 30 mutations on its spike protein, seen here in orange, blue, and green. That's 3 times more mutations than the Delta variant. Researchers in southern Africa suspect Omicron is driving a dramatic surge in cases.
Because of the exponential growth in infections, because it's taken over and replaced the Delta variants in our country, we think transmissibility may be an issue.
Preliminary data shows the risk of reinfection for those who have already had the virus is 3 times that of other strains. But the WHO says a key question is the severity of illness. In South Africa, early reports suggest symptoms may be less severe.
The people that are admitted with the Omicron variant in Gauteng province actually have less severe disease than previous waves, but this is based on very few patients very early on.
NACI is strongly recommending all Canadians 50 and over get a 3rd dose of an mRNA vaccine, and those who are 18 plus be offered a booster 6 months after their initial shots.
By getting a booster, you give your body more time to train and to get prepared for Omicron. So that's why a booster is helpful.
The WHO has set a target of every country vaccinating 40% of their population by the end of this year. Health experts are hoping that will help prevent future waves. Heather Butts, CTV News, Toronto.
And let's now bring in Jason Kindrachuk, Assistant Professor and Canada Research Chair in Emerging Viruses at the University of Manitoba. Jason, welcome to the show. It's great to have you back.
Thanks for having me on, Akshay.
So, Jason, I have to ask you this very honestly. Since you are the chair of emerging viruses, let me ask you this. The last 10 days, how have they been for you, especially since the news of Omicron variant and then entering into Canada?
It's been tough. I haven't had a lot of sleep. I think the inspiration, though, comes from the fact that there are thousands of other people like me and certainly much more experienced than me that have also not had much sleep. Listen, we're trying to rise to the occasion, right? We don't know what Omicron fully is yet. We're trying to figure out how we can quickly assess the situation and get information out to the public. And it takes a lot of hours and it's grueling, but we need to do it.
Yeah. So what have we been able to determine in the last few days? Some characteristics of this variant, and why is this such a cause of concern, and how different is it from Delta?
Yeah, so, a lot of the answers to your questions, unfortunately, are still we don't know. And I say that very empathetically because I know that everybody wants to know what we're dealing with. The problem is right now is we're very heavily reliant on just epidemiology data. Certainly labs across the world are trying to either grow up virus or to get reagents into a lab to be able to characterize all these different properties, things like neutralizing antibodies, the effectiveness of vaccines, therapeutic efficacy, but that takes time. So we're probably, a couple of weeks out from getting that data. So right now we're really watching that epidemiology data. Certainly what's going on in South Africa in regards to hospitalizations, how that plays out across demographics, but also what we're seeing across the rest of the globe now that people are fully testing for Omicron.
So let's talk about what's happening in our country as well now, Jason. We are seeing a steady rise in cases from the largest provinces such as Ontario and Quebec. And while Delta remains the dominant strain here, there are countries reporting, like you also pointed out, where Omicron has become the dominant strain, and that too very quickly. What does it say about the variant?
Yeah, it's a great question, right? So the variants certainly will find, people that are unfortunately unvaccinated and potentially those that are vaccinated as well. We've heard the cases of reinfection, obviously, that have been reported, and that's been a big concern for all of us. But I think right now we have to continue to focus on the situation at hand. Delta is still putting a lot of people in hospital across the globe, certainly, and very unfortunately, still resulting in fatal infections across the globe. And we need to get a handle on transmission for that virus. And thankfully, some of those aspects will cross over for Omicron while we're still trying to figure out what Omicron is. So I think it's going to be bumpy for the next few weeks, but we've got to get back to making good decisions and certainly appreciating that we need to get transmission under control as quickly as possible.
I'll come to that decision bit in just a few moments, Jason, but I have to ask you this. Is there any study of the past that tells us how many more mutations or variants can one see before the pandemic as a whole really subsides?
This is a good question for evolutionary virologists. Listen, I don't think we know, right? So certainly, I don't think any of us anticipated we would see something like Omicron emerge that had so many mutations. Now, we have to, again, appreciate we can look at these individual mutations and we can ascribe certain activities to each of these. And that gives us at least some clarity on what may be happening, but we don't necessarily know how they work in concert with one another. And that's really where the laboratory studies are going to be important. Does this virus see a synergistic effect in all these mutations, or do you start to see things that cancel out? So I think we need to be cautious, but we have to appreciate the virus continues to change and continues to adapt. We've seen today reports of the virus infecting hippopotamuses in Belgium as well. So these types of things are important, that the virus is moving around and we're still getting really a clear picture of what it does in regards to its own evolution.
And my last question, Jason, you did speak about taking some decisions. We know the federal government has taken decisions on some travel ban to Africa and those nations over there. We know they're talking about having testing at the airport, which hasn't unfortunately started right now. Are these decisions, did you agree with these decisions, or more needs to be done?
I certainly think that there needs to be enhanced testing. We certainly need to find out where Omicron is and what the introductions are looking like, especially if it is more transmissible than Delta. The travel bans and travel restrictions are certainly difficult for me to swallow because I work in many of these areas of the world. And we have to appreciate that while South Africa and Botswana initially identified Omicron, they aren't necessarily the area where this virus or this variant emerged. And we have to appreciate that we also have to try and ensure that there's parity across the globe in regards to potential introductions. So you can cut off one area of the globe, but if you have Omicron, transmitting amongst other areas, you still may end up getting introductions, and we need to be very, very cautious about that.
Yeah, lots of questions on that particular decision, but we leave it at that for this evening. Jason Kendrachuk, Assistant Professor and Canada Research Chair in Emerging Viruses at the University of Manitoba. Thank you for your time, Jason.
Always a pleasure, Akshay.
In other news we are tracking, flood continues in Abbotsford, BC have started to improve, and now some residents are returning home for the first time since being evacuated. Abbotsford Mayor Henry Braun lifted the evacuation order for the north region of the Sumas Prairie yesterday and outlined the return home plan, warning that it won't be easy. Many homes are currently uninhabitable due to the flood damage, and it could be years before the region makes a full recovery. And south of the border, the parents of a 15-year-old Michigan teen are now in custody. All three face charges in relation to a deadly high school shooting that claimed the lives of 4 people and left 7 others injured. The teen was jailed right after the attack, but when charges were laid later against the parents, they were nowhere to be found.
We were notified by Detroit. They had received a tip that the vehicle had been seen. We were notified at 23:05, which is 11:05 p.m. Our fugitive folks arrived on scene with Detroit at 23:25, which is 11:25. just 20 minutes after the call, they arrived downtown Detroit to be with Detroit. Detroit had seen the car, had secured the scene, had established a perimeter, done some great police work. Ultimately, at approximately 1:30 in the morning, the two suspects were taken into custody at 11 Bellevue in Detroit in a commercial vehicle. They were in an art studio within that building.
And police believe the couple were given access to the building and charges could be pending for the individual who helped them. The parents were arraigned this morning and pleaded not guilty to involuntary manslaughter. They are being held on a $500,000 bond. And coming up, the House of Commons unanimously passed the bill to ban conversion therapy. The Liberals also reintroduced travel measures in the light of the new COVID-19 variant. More on this with our political panel on the Political Pulse just after this break. Stay with us.